Good morning. The City of Southport Board of Aldermen Workshop and Agenda Review, August 4th, 2023 is now called to order. Thank you for your attendance. Welcome to our citizens. Thank you, Board, City staff. Thank you, Madam Clerk. Thank you for arranging to have us in this building today. Ms. Dutton and City Manager, thank you for this agenda today. It's a very robust one as well. And welcome to all who are watching virtually. We have multiple presentations today. Welcome, and we look forward to those. Our invocation will be given by Reverend Alderman Lowe Davis, and this will be followed by the Pledge of Allegiance. Please stand.
The Lord be with you.
With your spirit.
Thank you. Let us pray. Most merciful Lord, we ask today that you be present in the meditations of our heart and in the words of our mouths, so that the decisions we make today reflect your presence. Amen.
Amen. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you, Alderman Davis. Item D is approval of the agenda. As I stated, we have multiple presentations today. We have a presentation by Habitat for Humanity. We have a discussion about our homeless population. We have a presentation by the Wilmington Metro Planning Organization, a presentation by the Rural Planning Organization, and a presentation of the electricity cost of service study. So this is a very busy agenda, and we hope to hear a lot of good information today for our citizens and for our board. So thank you for that. I would like to recommend, when we go to the approval of the agenda, which is item D, that as you see, the last item is the review of agenda for the August 10th Board of Aldermen meeting. On that agenda, and when we get to it, but I just wanted to announce it now, that for the discussion concerning homeless population, I feel like we should have a separate town hall meeting. And so we'll set a date for that today. There we can have presentations, discussions, dialogue, questions, public comment. Of course, we have public comment next week at the Board of Aldermen meeting anyway, and you can have public comment about any topic there as well as the homeless issue. But this is such an important topic that I wanted us to have a separate town hall meeting like we've done for other issues. And this gives our citizens a voice, gives them a chance to not only listen, but their voice, your voice, will be heard in an unlimited manner. We're not going anywhere. We'll be here from start to finish, and I want to hear all of your concerns concerning the homeless issue. In the meantime, it doesn't mean we're not working on it. We have ordinances. Our police, our city staff, our city manager, they're doing what they can in that regard. But as you know, this is a multifactorial issue. It's public health and safety, it's economics, it's environmental, it's emotional aspect of it. There's a mental health aspect, there's a medical care aspect in terms of this, and intervention from social workers to our police. So let's work through this. We are going to be very active and proactive in solving this issue, so I don't want you to think that we're not. So we will be enforcing the ordinances we have. If we need other ordinances, we certainly will amend the UDO for that. But I would like to, when we get to that point in our meeting today, that we set a date for a town hall concerning the homeless issue.
We need procedurally. Do we need to simply?
No, you can't do it.
Do we need to, at this point, instead of accepting this agenda, do we need to specify that we're removing D and planning to set a date?
No, I think we,
I don't think you're
No.
removing that topic off this workshop.
no,
Okay.
no, this has nothing to do, that's why I wanted to say this earlier. This has nothing to do with the workshop today. This has to do with the agenda for the August 10th meeting.
Okay, but before we approve that one, we want to take that off, right?
Yes, when we get to that point, this is a workshop for that, then we will do it at that time, yes. But I just want to let our citizens know ahead of time that that's what we plan to do, because we don't have public comment at the workshop today. Okay, any other questions? Okay, thank you. All right, I will entertain a motion to approve the agenda. Mayor Pro Tem and Alderman Lombardi, any further discussion? Okay, all in favor? Any opposed? Okay, motion carried unanimously. Thank you. First item on the agenda is item 1, presentation by Habitat for Humanity.
Thank you. Thank you. So my name is Carlo Montagano. I'm the Executive Director of Brunswick County Habitat for Humanity. I've been in this role for 5 years. Brunswick County Habitat for Humanity has been in existence for 30 years. This is our 30-year anniversary, so it's a big year for us. Please raise your hand if you've ever volunteered for Habitat, shopped at one of our thrift stores, donated. Thank you so much. That's a commitment to the community support that we receive, and thank you. Thank you so much for that. Shameless plug, we have a golf tournament on September 25th in Sea Trail. We actually only have 5 foursomes left, so if you're interested in golfing or sponsoring, we're still taking sponsorships. I'd like to just spend 2 minutes to tell you who we are. It's part of my role as Executive Director is to make sure people understand how Habitat works. No, Jimmy Carter did not found Habitat, and no, we don't give homes away for free. And so let's just start there. We are a nonprofit, we're a Christian ministry, we are a licensed construction company, we're a retailer, and we're a mortgage lender. So we are many things. We serve all races, ethnicities, and religions, and we serve people in Calabash, Leland, Navassa, Southport, everywhere in the county. We serve those people who make between 35% and 70% of the area median income, which, if you were to do the calculations, you realize that's not a whole lot of money. Folks who make that much money are working class folks, but banks will not lend them a loan. So they apply for our program, and they partner with us, and they put in hundreds of hours of volunteer time, and they save thousands of dollars towards their escrow. And they also take HUD-certified housing counseling classes, they manage their debt, they learn how to be homeowners through us. And then we reward them with the keys to a brand new house and a 30-year mortgage. So that's their gift. The folks that we serve are everyone from office assistants to Walmart staff to public works employees to retail folks to caregivers to CNAs to folks in fast food, security guards. Those are the folks that we serve. We build, our mission is to build homes, communities, and hope. We actually build 2, 3, and 4 bedroom brand new houses with 1 or 2 baths. We've got fortified roofs to prevent damage from hurricanes. What we build is truthfully home ownership, equity, and wealth accumulation for families that would otherwise never have a chance. And we build community partnerships. Anyone can apply. Eligibility is based on income, need, and willingness to partner. They sign an agreement, their families sign an agreement, and off to the races, and our board approves them. if they meet the criteria. We fund our program through donations, grants, and the generosity of the community, particularly with donations to our thrift stores. Please, please, please continue to donate to our thrift stores. That fuels our program. Our thrift stores are in Leland, Southport, and Ocean Isle. So that's a little bit about us. We're growing. We built 6 houses last year. We've never built 6 houses in any year. We're on track to build 8 houses this year and 10 houses the following year. So we're growing at a fairly rapid rate. Recently, we've built homes in Calabash, Charlotte, Boiling Springs, Southport, outside the city limits. We have houses going up right now in Holden Beach. Right now, we have 9 homes under construction throughout the county. We are working on the infrastructure for our first subdivision. So we're building a subdivision in Leland. It's going to be a 10-home subdivision. So, and we are increasing our partnerships, our very important partnerships with churches. So churches are stepping forward. Southport, shout out to Southport Presbyterian Church. They have stepped up with volunteers, lunches, spiritual support, and 2 $25,000 home sponsorships. So those type of partnerships are amazingly important, and they're growing. They're growing. A little bit about the climate for us to be building homes here in Brunswick County is obviously a higher cost to build and live in a shoreline community. It's a blessing, but it's really hard for us to build. Land is more desirable, thus it's more expensive. When I started, the land cost averaged $10,000 per buildable lot. We're at $30,000 right now, and it's only going up. So part of living in a shoreline community is our partner families, as you are all aware, have to have wind and hail insurance. That's an additional cost that you don't have in other parts of the country. And as you all know, infrastructure is always lagging population growth. So places where I want to see water and sewer, there is no water and sewer. So we're trying to navigate septic systems when we can and wells, and many times the property just can't support a septic system. So, and we have rising taxes. I'm sure you all are familiar with that. So, what conclusions have I drawn? There are parts of Brunswick County and where affordable housing just through Habitat may just not be feasible in certain towns. I hope it's not the case in Southport. We'll see. So North Carolina has actually 60 Habitat franchises serving 87 counties. There's actually 13 counties in North Carolina that are not served at all, Columbus County being one of them. But there are trends that emerge from the state, and one of them is a movement away from single lots and single homes. We buy an average of 10 to 12 lots a year. That's a lot of real estate work for us to be doing, and those lots are getting harder and harder to find. And so we are moving away from single lots and single homes. We are starting to move towards building small neighborhoods. And in Leland, we have our first subdivision I mentioned. Building a small neighborhood gives us an economy of scale. We can put a construction team there. We can hire an excavator to clear all the land, not one at a time. But we are then saddled with infrastructure costs. Clearing and putting in utilities on a property is very expensive, so hundreds of thousands of dollars. Additionally, many habitats are now moving to townhomes instead of single-family homes. There's a reality that just like you and I, some families don't want to mow a lawn, trim shrubs, paint their house, fix their roof. We are looking at townhomes, which require obviously the allowance for greater density. So those are just some of the conclusions that we're drawing. I put together a quick one-pager, and it's really answering a question: what ways can local governments support affordable housing efforts? That's really what I wanted to talk to you about today. But before I do, I just wanted to ask, first of all, to the Alderman, thank you so much for inviting me here today. I'm very appreciative. I would love to take a minute and ask you, outside the philosophical belief that we share, which is that everyone deserves a decent place to live, what are the drivers for Southport's interest in affordable housing? Said differently, why did you invite me here?
Since I sort of did the inviting, Carlo and I have already met. I think one of the issues that we're running into from City Hall is we've already offered jobs to people, and they are all excited about coming until they look at the real estate in this area, and they say we cannot afford to move. So we are losing very, very good possible candidates because the housing market, not just Southport, the entire area is extremely high. So we've lost some really good people, and I think that's going to continue if something doesn't change.
Anyone else? All right, well, please, is there any other thoughts? So the 6 items I'm going to talk to in the next couple minutes they're not unique to me. These are simply trends that we see within other Habitat affiliates throughout the country of ways that local government can step in and make affordable housing more of a reality. The first is to take a leadership role for the city of Southport or any local government to take a leadership role in community engagement. I think inviting me here is definitely a first step, so that's fantastic. Start to educate folks on affordable housing. What Bonnie just mentioned, you've got great shops and restaurants, but if you can't hire people to work here, that's going to affect the town for sure. Form a task force, include residents and businesses and community leaders, join existing groups. I'm a member of the Cape Fear Housing Coalition. There are a number of municipalities that attend. The two that are very strong at the Cape Fear Housing Coalition are the town of Leland and New Hanover County, and they are very prominent, and it'd be great to see some other representation, and occasionally we have some Brunswick County reps there as well, but it'd be great to see some of the other parts of Brunswick County attend the Cape Fear Housing Coalition. I'm happy to make the introductions and get you on board. We learn a lot about what successes and failures in other parts of the state through the Cape Fear Housing Coalition, but help break down NIMBY barriers. NIMBY is an acronym for Not in My Backyard. So, a lot of folks will say, affordable housing is great. Not here, but over there, it's great. And so, we joke about it, but truthfully, almost every Habitat affiliate has run into community members that come out in opposition to what we do. So, but I invite you all to follow us on Facebook. We announce every home dedication. Come to one of our dedications. See the homes that we build. They're absolutely amazing. So that's one way, is to take a leadership role in the community. Another way is to reimburse not necessarily us, but affordable housing builders permitting fees for projects once we obtain a certificate of occupancy. So the Brunswick County does this for us. So when we build in the county and we successfully get a CO, we have an agreement with the county, they reimburse us our permit fees. So to me, there's a financial commitment. They have skin in the game when they do that. And that's something how many municipalities are there in Brunswick County? 20, 22? How many? 19? So clearly the county is the only municipality that does that. The third way is to find ways to waive or reduce or defer TAP and impact fees. When we build a house pretty much anywhere in the county, we pay roughly $12,000 to connect to sewer and water services. And my best calculations for Southport is that's north of $18,000. So, that $6,000 difference is quite significant for a nonprofit. Fourth way is to donate land. Donate town-owned land. Encourage your citizens to donate town-owned land. New Hanover County recently donated land to Cape Fear Habitat, which again is another visible commitment for a municipality to support affordable housing. In a way, it also speeds up the process, because if a town or a municipality or a city is donating a piece of land, they're essentially saying, we're okay with you building what you build here, which is a conversation we generally have to have with every municipality, is exactly what are you going to build and what do you want to do? The next one is to provide flexibility in zoning to optimize affordable housing neighborhoods. The D word, density. I think a lot of folks don't like to hear that word. Density means more residences in a smaller area. But density creates a more affordable community. It's also a more efficient use of the land. And there are times when affordable housing organizations will have to approach a municipality and ask for greater density. And there's always a valid reason for that, but be open to that. And then the last one is really invest in the infrastructure of neighborhoods where affordable housing is likely to emerge. I think you all know the parts of Southport where we will likely end up building. I think you all know where they are. And the infrastructure there, the roads, the sewers, the drainage ditches, the easements, all of that is not on par with the rest of Southport. So, when we make an attempt to move into an area that's just not been treated the same as other parts, we would look for local government to help us and recognize that some of the infrastructure needs to be upgraded in order for that neighborhood to be successful. That's everything I wanted to share. I mean, I'm open to questions or whatever you'd like to do, by all means.
Any questions from the board?
I just had a quick question, and I'm over the years very familiar with Habitat and have worked on projects and actually building. And so my question is, I know your mission is home ownership, but part of the struggle we have is also the need for rental properties. Does Habitat ever branch out and do a project that would be apartments that would have these same kind of standards, but could it be rental projects?
So, Habitat is what's called a federated organization. We have a parent organization called Habitat for Humanity International. They're in Georgia. And they set 3 things for us. They set policy, mission, and brand guidelines. And up until now, rental units have not been part of Habitat's mission. We have a state summit with the 60 Habitat affiliates, and there are conversations happening across the country about entering the rental market. Right now, I don't see a path forward, but I think the drastic need for housing is making people think outside the box, and I don't think there's another national affordable housing entity than Habitat who could have that kind of an impact. So I think there is conversations happening, but right now we're not allowed to do rental properties. I think it's a great question.
Any other questions? Thank you. That's an excellent presentation. And since Habitat, you said Habitat for Humanity International is in Georgia, so Jimmy Carter probably did found it, right?
He did not.
I'm just teasing. I am just teasing. Stop. No, no. It's remarkable what these volunteers have done and what this program has done to build these homes. These people are working, and the fact that they can, you see it on the press covers it beautifully in print as well as on TV, and it's just a remarkable moment when they get that key and get into that home. So thank you for all you are doing, and thank you for that presentation. And come back anytime and give us an update. Thank you so much. Our next item, item 2, discussion about the homeless population. And I'll turn it over to our city manager, Bonnie Theron.
Thank you, Mayor. I'd say about 3-4 weeks ago, Chief Coring, who by the way could not be here today due to a family commitment, he and I started talking because we were receiving more and more complaints about the homeless and the numbers. And so I had said to the chief, I think it's a good idea if we bring it to the attention of the board so that we can actually take a look at it and try to see what the reasons are and what, if anything, could be done on that. I asked Major Burke if he could talk to the other officers about how many people are we talking, because I had no idea. And he said, in speaking with the other officers, we're talking probably about 5 people. And I asked if that is less, more than usual. He said, no. I mean, he said some can come and go, some will come, but he said it's probably somewhere in that area. It's a 4 or 5 type of thing. What's happened, I think, more and more is that there's a lot more seeing of people down in the downtown area. And that's kind of created, and there's actually been some issues that have occurred. Now, in looking at the list, because I know all of you received a lot of emails on this, some of those incidents we are not aware of. So if there's anything anybody can take home with them, is that if something occurs, you've got to call the police, or we don't know about it. So I think it's very, very important for people to pick up that phone and call. There's been suggestions, let's follow Wilmington's ordinances, let's follow other people's ordinances. We already have ordinances in place that do not allow for sleeping overnight in the parks and on the public area. And if the police do see it, they stop it. And the police are well aware of who these people are. They try to help them and get them help. Some people don't want help, but the police are definitely done an awesome job about reaching out to these people and trying to help as much as possible. One of the things is I held a meeting this week with some of the officers. I know Karen, our deputy mayor, was there also, with Sally Lerner, the executive director of the Brunswick County Partnership for Housing, who just had her grand opening, and a very successful one, of transitional housing for the homeless. So I asked her to come. Major Burke will also be here to discuss the item, but she's got a unique perspective on what is and what is not going on. And so, Mayor, I'd like to ask Sally and Major Burke, to come up and kind of do an overview of the situation that we're currently having, and then we can discuss possible options. Thanks, Sally.
Thank you, City Manager. Excellent, and welcome.
Thank you so much. There's a sign here, huge sign. Press the button before speaking. Just letting you all know that. As Bonnie said, I'm Sally Learned. I'm Executive Director for Brunswick Partnership for Housing. We are a nonprofit that provides services for homeless families and individuals all across Brunswick County. So we provide outreach and referral and case management through a contract actually with Brunswick County. So they contract with us to provide an outreach specialist who is trained in mental health issues. And we work with homeless individuals and families to help them access services and programs and try to identify housing. We also have a transitional housing program that just opened on East 11th Street. So we are your neighbor. We are very excited to be in Southport and to have the renovation complete. We are now filling those apartments with homeless families with children. I have worked, just to give you a sense, a little bit of who I am, I have worked in the nonprofit sector in North Carolina for over 40 years. I'm old. I've done work in poverty populations with affordable housing development in the heyday of affordable housing development in North Carolina. I've worked with other high-risk populations who have been involved in behavioral health entities, and for 10 years I managed a community-based criminal justice nonprofit in the 25th Judicial District. When I moved down here in 2016, what struck me at first was the lack of coordination among nonprofits and the high levels of need that we were seeing. So I'm also moderator for the Southport Oak Island Interchurch Fellowship, which is a nonprofit organization of 16 churches in our region that provide emergency needs for individuals and families who are low income. So we have a human needs program, and we have the food pantry up in Boiling Springs that serves this area. And part of the work that the Interchurch Fellowship was doing, that I got involved in, was working with homeless individuals and families, in the winter particularly, with winter shelter. We would partner with the Captain's Cove over on Oak Island. Off-season, they would give us rooms at a very giveaway rate, just enough for them to be able to clean the rooms. We could house families for up to a week, provide them with a hot dinner and some support, but there was no case management. There was no coordination of those services beyond that emergency respite stay. And what we saw over the years with winter shelter was that the needs of homeless people were increasing, the numbers were increasing, and not only were the numbers increasing, but the face of homelessness was changing. It used to be just that we saw those 5 single males you might encounter in downtown Southport today. But what happened was that with COVID, with the economic drivers, with inflation, and then with the hot housing market and the resale of rental properties in Brunswick County, rents drove up by 300%. So I know y'all hear this anecdotally. You've talked to neighbors, you've talked to family members who can't move here. You know from the county government, your own experience with government, teachers, Novant's having problems. Everybody is having problems bringing people into the community to work because there is no affordable housing. When rents are running $1,800 to $2,200 a month, entry-level folks cannot live in Brunswick County. People who are working in your service and tourist trades, in your hospitality industry, cannot live in Brunswick County. And so what we began to see in Brunswick was an increase in the number of folks that were working who are homeless. And that is a huge number, and it's almost impossible to get a feel for what that number is because they're couch surfing, they're sleeping in their cars, they're moving from place to place to place throughout the night, so they hit that 4-hour maximum, and then they move around. They're trying to stay safe. They're trying to keep their children stable. They're trying to keep the children fed and in school. They're trying to stay clean enough to work. But there's a constant level of trauma associated with those individuals and families. So these are folks who are working for us. These are folks who are living in our community, who are paying taxes and have no housing. And this is not just a Southport problem. It's not just a Brunswick County problem. We have no affordable housing to place them in anywhere in our immediate region or across the state. If people want affordable housing, they have to, it's almost impossible to find it. So we're working with families that are pre-Habitat pipeline. You know, we're working with those families who are working, but we need to get them stable. We need to reduce that trauma and the chaos that goes with homelessness and causes major issues for children, young children, in neuropathway development and later problems as adults. We need to let folks work on their savings, clean up their credit, and then be able to even rent an apartment or get into a Habitat pipeline. That's what we're seeing in Brunswick County. Those drivers are huge right now. And without an effective public-private partnership and all the things Carlos was bringing up to you, we're not going to solve this problem. So as a nonprofit sector in Brunswick County, we have a Brunswick subcommittee for the homeless continuum of care that operates in the region. So our agencies in Brunswick who are working with homeless people come together once a month to coordinate services, coordinate case management around clients. But none of us have any place to move people to. And this is happening from Leland to Charlotte. We've got this huge issue in Brunswick County. We are the only shelter, and we don't provide emergency shelter in a facility. We provide transitional housing, which allows families up to 12 months to get on their feet and then move on. Emergency shelter is only provided through a partnership with a network of motels in the county, from Leland, Holiday Inn Express in Leland, Wingate here, some at the Captain's Cove, and then down in Charlotte at the Days Inn Express. Not counting any public funds from DSS or law enforcement that may have housed people, the nonprofit sector has invested $75,000 to $80,000 in emergency respite in our hotels since the beginning of the year. That is not sustainable. We can't continue to do that. The money is gone. I'm here to tell you all of the agencies are scrambling right now trying to find resources. We are working with Habitat right now with a family who is on a pathway to home ownership, but she and her children are in an unsafe living situation. We will take them into our transitional housing program probably over the next week so that she can work on those savings and do the things she can do to get to permanent housing. I've got another mother and a grandmother and her 13-year-old grandchild who are moving in tonight and tomorrow. She's working full-time. One of our units is homeless hospital discharges. So we work with folks that are homeless, coming out of the hospital, need 60 to 90 days respite so that they can get stable and not be back into that hospital cycle. That unit is full. We are partnering with another nonprofit who provides specialized skills for medical case management. That unit will stay full as we move forward with that project. So what we want to do as we look with serving homeless is recognize that we're dealing with people who are coming from a broad spectrum of need and background. Yes, there is that point and tip of the iceberg of folks that we see on the street who have mental health or substance abuse issues, who are chronically unemployed and chronically homeless. And yes, they probably provide the highest risk to your community. But we can mitigate that risk by increasing our partnerships between our social service entities and law enforcement, by having citizens report those folks to law enforcement, and then we can move in with outreach, we can move in with placement into services, and help law enforcement take a good look at those individuals to say, what's going on here? What's happening? How can we make this a safe situation? You already have in Southport ordinances on the books, and you have the ability to, through law enforcement, regulate and respond to high-risk behaviors and inappropriate behaviors. What we need is to bring a line of support behind law enforcement, and we can do that through the social service network and the nonprofit network. So we're already in discussions with Major Burke about providing some training with his chiefs and his law enforcement staff. Our outreach specialist is going to be housed in our office here in Southport. He is mental health trained. He will be able to respond to folks. And we work closely, again, with the Behavioral Health, Mental Health Network, and the Medicaid Housing Opportunity Program for the high-risk medical folks so that we can find housing money for some of those. But affordable housing is the issue. It is the issue of our time. Like access to medical care insurance was a decade ago, affordable housing is the challenge as communities that we are facing. And we are going to have to go back into the 1980s when North Carolina was a forerunner for public and private partnerships. Back in the day, those of you who have been in North Carolina and got some experience and age in the state with me know that counties and municipalities were partnering with nonprofits and developers to make sure that we were getting affordable units on the ground. Without that partnership, we can't solve the situation of people not having housing. And when we don't solve that problem, then what we see is kids that are going to be challenged the rest of their life. Trauma and homelessness caused trauma is a huge risk factor for our kids. And we know that by third grade, those kids have actually developed alternate neuropathways to cope with those high levels of trauma. We used to say that by third grade, we could look at the math and reading scores and project out the number of prison beds we were going to need. Well, we know now why we said that, because the brain actually reforms as a result of trauma. So the more we can reach in and provide supports for the neediest in our community, the better off we are all going to be down the road. So I guess what I want to say is, as we look at this issue, I encourage city aldermen to continue to reach out and learn what the causes, what the face of homelessness looks like in our community. Look at how we can blend existing ordinances with an increased partnership with social service agencies, private and public, and look at what we can do for those long-term solutions. We know, our board of directors knows with Brunswick Partnership for Housing, that a year from now, as we're ready to move folks out over that threshold back into the market, the rental market, we will be in increasing trouble if we don't have affordable units waiting for us. So right now, we're trying to take folks in the Habitat stream. We're trying to move folks out of Hope Harbor to uncap so they can serve more people at the domestic violence shelter. We're trying to work with folks who are working. And what we need to do is see what we can do to develop those partnerships on a public-private basis. And I agree with Carlo. You want to reimburse me the permit fee for the city? I'll take it. $25,000 permit fee as a nonprofit to provide housing for your homeless folks. So, yeah, I'll take that reimbursement, Carlo. Good job. I'd be glad to answer any questions you have. I just give you a tour if anybody's interested in seeing our facility or talking in more depth. We have a couple days here before all of our units are full. I expect that we will be full by the end of the week. But we'd be glad to show you what we're doing and talk to you a little bit more about what we've got.
This may be a question for Major Burke, but if somebody is reported as homeless sitting on the street causing a problem or not, and the officers go there, what happens exactly after that? Where do they go?
Well, I'm going to let Major Burke speak to the law enforcement part. I can speak to the piece that says if we can get that person referred to our outreach specialists, and also what Major Burke does is he works with, their officers have been crisis intervention trained, so they can respond, and we can also get mobile crisis out of Coastal Horizons. If we can get that person to engage with a behavioral health program, then we have a chance of also maybe getting them into a bed, into housing someplace. If they choose not to engage, then law enforcement has to make some decisions about enforcement of laws and anything that ordinances that might have been broken.
And she's absolutely right, and I'll go back to some of the stuff that Bonnie mentioned earlier, but for all intents and purposes, if you guys call, the citizens call, the officers respond, they will evaluate history with this person, the actual actions, what took place, not what was alleged, or figure out the facts, and evaluate whether enforcement, being a physical arrest or something like that, is warranted. If you pick up on what both the two presenters have said so far, one of the biggest concerns are resources. So putting that person into the legal system, into the criminal justice system, just compounds the problem significantly because it adds a dollar drain on resources they don't have either. That's not saying we won't make the arrest if it's appropriate. We will try to deal with the situation based on the circumstances that we have at that time and what the long-term best outcome can be, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I just to make it clearer, a person was sitting at the post office in one of the parking spaces. So when you go there and they refuse or they accept, what exactly do you do? I mean, where do they go from there as well?
And that's when we'll, like Ms. Lerner said, we'll start with the outreach program, reach out to either mobile crisis or some of these other resources to have them come to us or bring that person to them to start the conversation, to figure out what resources, what needs they actually have, and where the most appropriate route will send them. And these are processes that are still being developed. As you've obviously seen, we have significantly limited resources as far as housing and stuff like that. But the counselors and the face-to-face intervention will start right then.
Thank you.
What the last thing we want to do, and I guess this would be kind of a thought to leave you all with, is criminalize homelessness. Being homeless is not a crime. What you do when you're homeless can be a crime, but being homeless itself isn't the crime. So I really want us to kind of keep that in mind as we move forward in this discussion and look strategically at how we can serve people. We know that if we start over criminalizing being homeless, then we drive people more and more into the woods. That mother and child is no longer going to be in as much of a secure environment as she can be in. Yes, she may be sleeping in her car for 4 hours down at the waterfront before she moves that car to another location. She may be sleeping in a Walmart parking lot that's lit. Law enforcement's driving through it, but she's safe. If we move her out into the woods and out of town, she is going to disengage from any encounter with services, with help from law enforcement, with help that we can provide her. And what's going to happen is that that cost burden is going to fall eventually down the road onto DSS, onto foster care, onto the court system, and we're going to have people in jail. Our jails currently are the biggest provider of behavioral health services, where we are warehousing our folks in jails right now. So what we want to do is find a way to strategically and safely address the needs, but do it in a way that gives people an opportunity. And that's going to take a wide spectrum of responses. So this is the message I left with Brunswick County. I'm going to leave it with you. I'm going to leave it with every public entity I can talk to. You guys got to talk to each other. On this higher level, if all I can do is get Brunswick, Leland, Charlotte, Southport, Oak Island to the table, and you can talk about affordable housing, that would be a win, an absolute win. How you might approach this as a collective of municipal and county government, and how you could then work with the developers. We know we have developers willing to come in, but there's no public entity partnership support. And until that happens, we can't solve the housing market problem, we can't solve the homeless problem.
Any other questions? That was marvelous presentation, and a lot of good information, and two things. One, that using third grade math scores to predict, you said prison beds. I mean, if that doesn't, well, first of all, thank good you made good grades when you were in third grade in math, but I mean, that's just a phenomenal statement right there. And secondly, where you are located, many of you may know this, but it brought back fond memories for me. That was Dr. Forstner's office. He had a clinic there. And I would work for him when he would go on vacation. And you mentioned access to health care. One of the things he did, well, two of the things. One, he saw Medicaid patients, saw every one of them that would come. And secondly, I was telling the front staff, I'm seeing a lot of kids, a lot of children in this clinic. So why is that? She said that he never turns away a child, ever. And so how wonderful it is that clinic is now, you don't turn anyone away, so to speak. You're trying to do great things there just like he did. And I'm grateful that you have that housing there. And again, it just brought back fond memories of me, and glad that something good is still being done at that in that area. So thank you for that. Major Burke.
Yes. I'm just going to recap because I figure there may be questions more than anything else, but just to reach back to what the manager said earlier, if we don't get notified, if the community doesn't call 911, which is the appropriate process, we can't go and respond, okay? One of the issues associated with this and other situations is we are a small community. Everybody knows everybody, which is superb. However, sending emails in response to an event that's occurring right now, all it does is slow down the response process, so then when we respond, it takes it may be a day or so later or several hours later. So if you see something going on, if you see something that's inappropriate, call 911. That is the proper procedure. So the officers that are on duty, that are out there, can respond. They know then, they know immediately if that officer's tied up, another officer will hear that call go out, and then they'll respond so that we can get there as quick as possible to see in reality what's occurring. To reach back again as far as numbers go, so we have talked to my patrol officers, and they're the ones that are out there every day. They know these people. They know them by name. They know their stories just about all the time. We're dealing roughly with somewhere between 5 and 7 homeless people on the streets in their vehicles pretty much from the first of the year to date. There have been 1 or 2 transients that have come through that have been here for a day or two. And just to give a quick snapshot of it, a couple that we did we actually worked with, we went from 7 to 5 because we were coordinated with them, got them some jobs, and it's my understanding to date they're working. So they may come to see you guys at some point in time as we move through the system. There are at least 2 of them that we've spoken to, the officers have spoken to, and just like most of the residents and everybody in this room, more than likely, they love Southport, and they don't intend on leaving. And absent any particular crimes or anything else, there's no reason for them to leave. So that's what we have to deal with when we respond. So when the public calls 911 to report these issues, we have to deal with the crime element. If there is a criminal element involved in it, then we'll address it the best we can based on all the circumstances at the time. If the underlying issue is they need some of these resources, that's when we reach out and have those counselors, have that other support service that steps in that will help us find places for them to go, respite for them, potential jobs, whatever else we can do. I can tell you several of the officers that work here now have paid for quite a bit of food, housing, and some other stuff out of their own pockets to give these folks a day. The problem with that is it does still put them down the road the next day in a few hours in another unsafe situation, and then the process just starts over. So I think as you guys have already heard here today, the biggest concern, the biggest fix here is going to be some networking and some team effort and long-term goals to try to get permanent solutions in place. So as far as law enforcement, it is not our objective to put them in a jail, because once we arrest them and put them in, again, all it does is compound the problem. If they don't have resources, now they're going to need defense attorneys. And yes, they do spend, there are a lot in jail. It's just more money that they don't have that they have to pay. And so we don't want to muddy the waters even more by adding another resource, another issue to it. Also, if you look, there's been some conversation about the ordinances. The ordinances are in place. They may need to be reviewed, maybe polished and cleaned up a little bit. We can maybe address that with the town hall meeting or something down the line to clean them up a little bit. But again, we don't know about it. We can't respond. We can't address that issue. Instead of adding more ordinances, I think let's look at what we have in place. We'll work with those, get the procedures and the process narrowed down so everybody knows what to do, and then we address it from there. I'll leave that. We can go on and on about it, but if you have any questions, I'll be more than happy to try to address them.
Any questions? I think, I know from being at the hospital in the ER, y'all have come and helped us with some of the homeless situations there. We have a patient that's sick, and then it's time for discharge, and they have no place to go. And what we would try to do is get them the help they would need, even host them in the ER overnight till the social worker could see them. I think social workers are a big part of the solution for this, intervention and that type of thing. So thank you and your department for your response at the hospital when we have those cases. Appreciate that so much.
Yes, sir. And those hospital responses are the same issues here in Novant and every location. Those folks that you've heard mentioned post-discharge that don't have anywhere to go, again, if we deal with them immediately, it still just delays the response. There's still additional issues that need to be addressed, and that's what we need to look at and focus on, is the bigger picture, not just getting them out of downtown, not just getting them off of this location. If it's an issue in a park or something, a crime, then we'll address the criminal aspect of it, but not the homeless aspect of it.
If I can make one last pitch, Sally won't do it, I'll do it for her. Please, please, go tour her facility. It's amazing. She needs volunteers. She needs money. So any way that you can assist, please go. You got a great website, Brunswick Partnership for Housing, and I'm sure she can keep you busy. So thanks, Sally, for coming today. Appreciate it very much.
Thank you. Great presentations. Next item on our agenda, item 3, is a presentation by Wilmington Metro Planning Organization.
Just as a quick, in July, you had requested that the 3 agencies come and speak to you. The executive director of Grand Strand is on vacation, so couldn't make it, so he will be coming at a future meeting. So, Mike, I appreciate you being here today, and Sam also. So we'll go on with the presentations.
All right. Well, good morning, Mr. Mayor. Thank you for the opportunity to be here. Also to the Board of Aldermen. Appreciate the invitation. With the release of the 2020 decennial census, the MPOs are required to review our boundary and governance and structure and determine if there's any desire for expansion. Our board is being very deliberate in their process. This is a collaborative process. If we were to expand, it's not something that we can just go out and say we're going to expand. We have to have the support from any jurisdiction that would also want to become part of the MPO. Our board has authorized us to reach out and gauge interest from potential jurisdictions. We presented a few scenarios to the board earlier this year, one to go to the north and east and another to go to the south, and then the third option would be to expand to both areas. And so we reached out. Abby Lorenzo, who's the deputy director with the MPO, had a meeting a few months back with several of the local jurisdictions in this area. And then as a follow-up from that, we've been asked to come and give a presentation. I will also recognize Sam Shore, or not Sam Boswell, sorry, who's here with the Cape Fear RPO. You're currently in the RPO, and they're doing a wonderful job for you. I'm not here to sell you on becoming a member of the MPO. I'm just here to provide information. So, the presentation overview, so I'm going to talk a little bit about metropolitan planning organizations, who we are, what we do, and then get into the specifics of the Wilmington MPO. Also talk a little bit about our federal requirements, talk about some board-directed responsibilities, and then finally talk about the process of potential expansion. And so just a little bit of background on metropolitan planning organizations in general. They were created out of the Federal Highway Act of 1962, and they're created for any urbanized area of 50,000 or more in population. There's another threshold once you reach 200,000, which you're designated as a transportation management area. And we're federally funded. We're the federally designated transportation planning agency for the Wilmington urban area. And part of our mission is to conduct transportation planning in the 3C process, which is continuing, cooperative, and comprehensive. Some more details about the Wilmington MPO specifically. We were created in 1978 from the 1970 decennial census. We have a 13-member board, which I'll talk to you about on the next slide. But we provide transportation planning services currently for about 300,000 people. Our planning area boundary is 494 square miles. Those services are provided for 7 municipalities and 3 counties. And it's important to point out that in 2012, from the 2010 census, we were designated as a transportation management area, which meant our population reached over that 200,000 threshold. There's some positives. There's also some negatives with that. It requires additional reporting requirements. We've got to go through a federal certification every 4 years. We're required to develop a congestion management process. But also a benefit of that is that we get what's called direct attributable funds, and that's about $5 million annually that we get to disperse to our members through a competitive call. The organization currently has 12 staff members that provide transportation planning services for our region. Our organization's broken down into two sides of the house. We have our planning side of the house, which develop our long-range plans, and then we have our technical services side of the house, which focuses on development review, traffic impact analysis review. We have an annual traffic count program, as well as they're responsible for the implementation of our direct attributable program, and I'll talk a little bit about those here in a minute. We do have a 13-member board that sets the policy and direction for the organization. As you can see, Hank Miller, who's on the board of aldermen at Wrightsville Beach, is our chairman. Luke Waddell represents the city of Wilmington, and he is our vice chairman. We also have several other committees within the organization. We have a technical coordinating committee, which is the staff from our various jurisdictions. They provide recommendations to the board on matters that come before the board. We also have a transportation demand management committee, which is called Go Coast. Their goal is to try to get people out of their single occupancy vehicles, trying to promote carpooling, van pooling, alternative transportation. Then we have a citizen advisory committee as well as a technical committee that are also working on our long-range transportation plan, as well as a bicycle and pedestrian advisory committee. So there's a lot of committees that we work with at the MPO, and we work collaboratively with our members. So some federal requirements that we have as part of the MPO is we're required to develop a long-range transportation plan every 5 years, and that is the plan that we use to set the stage for prioritization and then also for the project selection in our area. It must be fiscally constrained, which means it's not a wish list of projects. We do a financial analysis to determine which projects we can actually fund over the horizon of the plan. A federal requirement, because we are the federally designated transportation planning agency for the MPO region, is that we must mutually adopt the Metropolitan Planning Organization and State Transportation Improvement Program. We're responsible for all the federal funds that come to our region. As I mentioned earlier, we're required to develop a congestion management process. We allocate our direct attributable funds. We also are required to adopt a federal functional classification, which feeds into the eligibility of projects to receive federal dollars. And then we also provide our members with transportation assistance in developing plans. And so just to talk a little bit about the Metropolitan Transportation Plan, as I mentioned, it's required to be developed every 5 years. Our current long-range transportation plan is Cape Fear Moving Forward 2045. And this plan is required to be multimodal. So it's not just a plan for highways. It's, we work collaboratively with Wilmington International Airport, with the North Carolina Department of Transportation, with the Ferry Division, with many modal partners on the development of this plan. It must incorporate the federal requirements for the federal planning requirements. And as I mentioned, it must be fiscally constrained. So we've got to develop a financial analysis. We look at historical trends, what projects can be funded based on the amount of dollars that we project to come into this region. The vast majority of this plan is prepared in-house. The only part of this plan that we actually hire a consultant for is the financial analysis. And so this is the blueprint for our transportation infrastructure over the next 25 years. And I would be remiss to not say that we just kicked off last night Cape Fear Navigating Change 2050, which will be our next long-range transportation plan, and it must be adopted by November 18th of 2025. That plan feeds into the development of our projects in our region. And so if you recall, back in 2013, the legislature passed the Strategic Transportation Investment Formula, which is a data-driven way of how we prioritize projects in the state and in our region. We work collaboratively with the North Carolina Department of Transportation and our modal partners to submit projects. We're eligible to submit up to 20 projects per mode and assign 1,600 points to the various projects in our region. We work, as I mentioned, collaboratively with the jurisdictions as well as our partners through that prioritization process. We also are required to adopt a local input methodology for how we assign those points that are allocated at the regional and division tiers. The results of that are the state and MPO's Transportation Improvement Program. This is a slide that shows the old program. This is the 2020 to 2029 STIP. The DOT's moved to a more user-friendly format, and so that is working its way through the adoption process. The Board of Transportation adopted the STIP on June 6th of this year. As I mentioned, as an MPO, we're required to mutually adopt that, and so we're going through our process now. It required a 30-day public comment period, a public hearing. We've held those events, and so we look forward to adopting that program in August. But that's a culmination of about 2 years of work and working with the department on that effort. Congestion management process and plan. This plan is an analysis of 33 major corridors in our region. We also perform hotspot analysis, and the results of these are recommendations, and this effort feeds into the development of our Metropolitan Transportation Plan. As I mentioned, we also receive direct attributable funds, about $5 million annually. Those include the Surface Transportation Block Grant Funds, our Transportation Alternative Set-Aside Funds, as well as our Carbon Reduction Program funds. And we disseminate those based on a competitive process. And so this slide just shows some of the projects that we fund. Many of our members apply for these projects for like bike ped improvements or congestion mitigation improvements. And so the next slide shows the projects that we funded and where they're at in the process. You can see the town of Leland has used these funds to complete a number of bicycle and pedestrian projects. We've just earlier this week broke ground with the town of Belleville on the NC 133 widening, as well as we, the MPO, have funded the multi-use path along 133. We've implemented or funded a number of projects in Curry Beach, Carolina Beach, and the city of Wilmington. The federal functional classification, we're required to develop and adopt a federal functional classification map, and this identifies the classification of our area roadways, anything from a freeway to a principal arterial to a collector street. Federal funds can be used to make improvements on a collector street or higher for certain projects like roadway improvements, and then for bike ped, it can be used on any of our streets. And so, but the federal functional classification system allows us to use those federal dollars on those roadways that are identified as a major, I think it's a major collector or higher. We also, as I mentioned, assist our various jurisdictions with their planning efforts. This slide just shows some of the plans that we've helped our members complete, anything from a collector street plan or a future streets plan in the town of Navassa to a bike ped plan in Curry Beach to just recently in July, our board adopted the Walk Wilmington pedestrian plan, in which we worked very closely with the Department of Transportation to develop that plan, but Abby led that plan for the city of Wilmington. We also have some other responsibilities that our board desires us to undertake, and those are the collection of bicycle and pedestrian counts, as well as vehicular counts, site development review, traffic impact analysis review, as well as our Go Coast TDM program. And so just talk a little bit about our traffic count program. We have a staff member dedicated solely to going out and collecting traffic counts on our major roadways throughout the region. In 2022, he collected 372 regular counts, as well as 131 special counts. And we keep a database of these counts so we can look from year to year how traffic counts are changing throughout the region at these specific locations. And then our members sometimes ask us for special counts if you've got development proposals that are in the works and they want to have a traffic count on a roadway. We can go out and collect that count as well. Site development review, we assist our members with development review activities. We sit on technical review committees for our members, and so over the last, in FY22, we reviewed 998 developments in our planning area boundary. Also, traffic impact analysis review. In many of our jurisdictions, they have a traffic impact analysis ordinance, which identifies that any development that generates over 100 AM or PM peak hour trips is required to perform a traffic impact analysis. And so we work collaboratively with the Department of Transportation and our members to review these traffic impact analysis. I've got a PE on staff that's a trained traffic engineer that writes the approval letter for these development proposals. And then our TDM program, our Transportation Demand Management Program, I mentioned we have a Go Coast committee. They're comprised of major employers throughout the region that focus on trying to get people out of their single occupancy vehicles, trying to promote carpooling, van pooling, walking, biking, trying to get people off our roads. And so we have a staff member dedicated to trying to diversify mode choice. And then finally, that brings me to why I'm here, which is, as I mentioned at the beginning of the presentation, federal and state law require that we review our boundary, governance, and structure after the release of the decennial census. And so we are in the process of doing that. And so we did present some scenarios to our board. As you can see, the map before you shows the Wilmington MPO, where we're located. It also shows the Jacksonville MPO and their planning area boundary, as well as the Grand Strand area. And so our board authorized us to reach out to potential members, gauge interest, and see if there was interest in joining the MPO. And so we did do that. And so we are working through that process. So just a little bit of the schedule for how we've approached this is that the board appointed a subcommittee to look at our governance structure and boundary. They authorized us to go out and gauge interest from potential members. They did set a July 31st date in which they had requested formal interest from any potential jurisdictions. And then we must implement any changes no later than November 18th of 2025, which coincides with the adoption of our next Metropolitan Transportation Plan. And so I'm here today to present information. I know Sam is here as well, and then I'm happy to answer any questions that you may have, but appreciate the opportunity to be before you this morning.
Thank you. Any questions? Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Would you like to take a short break? Are you okay? All right, next up will be the RPO, Cape Fear RPO. And as I said, we're a member, Southport's a member of the RPO. And this was, they have multiple committees, and I'm sure Mr. Boswell will explain how they work. And they have an advisory committee that staff members are on. And the acronyms are quite I like them myself. I have to write them down, though. They have the RTAC, the Rural Transportation Advisory Committee. And they're the Cape Fear RPO, which is the Cape Fear Rural Transportation Planning Organization. And then they have the RTCC, which is the Rural Transportation Coordinating Committee. So they have these committees that help to promote in Brunswick, Columbus, and Pender counties improvement in transportation. And I was looking at the map, and I'm from Halifax County, and Halifax County is in the Peanut Belt RPO. So I thought that was, I remember those peanut farms as a kid. Yes, we're the Cape Fear RPO, which is the beautiful Cape Fear here, and the Peanut Belt RPO. So thank you for being here, Mr. Boswell. We look forward to the discussion.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I think you gave half of my presentation for me. So Mr. Mayor, Board of Aldermen, I'm grateful to be here. As has been said, my name is Sam Boswell, and I'm the director of the Cape Fear RPO, the Rural Planning Organization. And the RPO is kind of as cousins to the MPOs, we could say. But I'm happy to be here to present on what the RPO is, what we do. And so first, that's what I'll give you is an outline of what RPOs in general are, as well as then what and who the Cape Fear RPO is. Then a brief overview of kind of the big picture of the transportation planning process, which you also heard a lot from the Wilmington MPO. There's a lot of overlap in what we do in trying to engage our communities and somewhat explain the black box that can be planning sometimes, and hope to clarify any questions there. And with that, naturally flows into NCDOT's prioritization process, which Mike touched on. And I'll be happy to take any questions. So, as Mr. Mayor said, we have several RPOs, one of them being the Peanut Belt. And the not quite correct and clunky definition of RPOs is the rest of the area in the state, North Carolina, that are not MPOs. And so there is 18 of us, 18 RPOs spread across the state, each RPO taking in at least 3 counties, and some RPOs taking in as many as 10. The Albemarle RPO up on the north coast of North Carolina, they have a lot of ground to cover. Another point of comparison for a simple compare and contrast of MPOs and RPOs, whereas MPOs may cover roughly 75% of the state's population, RPOs will cover roughly 75% of the state's area geographically. RPOs were formed in 2001 and to provide services similar but not exactly the same as MPOs, largely due to RPOs not having quite the extent of federal regulations or requirements that we have to keep up with, as do our MPO partners. So what do? We help the North Carolina Department of Transportation in preparing comprehensive transportation plans. These CTPs in time length broaden in scope compared to the metropolitan transportation plans prepared through the MPOs, whereas the MPOs, MTPs, may be a 20, 25-year planning horizon. The CTPs are looking 30 to 35 years out and are not fiscally constrained as the MTPs are. And so this is a process of identifying future needs and trying to get an early idea of projects that we can use to address those needs. I am new to the Cape Fear RPO, but I know that the Brunswick County CTP is nearing completion of its most recent update. And in fact, I've been in touch with Travis, your staff, several times regarding projects to be placed in the CTP. We also provide a forum for public participation in the planning process. This can come in many forms. This can be with the CTP specifically in some public engagement, some public meetings. We had a few, in fact, in early May across Brunswick County. This can be in public meetings scheduled for special studies, such as greenway studies. This can be just in our general RPO meetings, both the RTCC and the RTAC. There's always a spot on the agenda for any public comment, should there be a member of the public who chooses to attend and provide us input in that way. That can also be in the form of surveys that may go out from time to time if there is a need to do so. And also, if my number gets out, they can just call me and tell me everything that they would like to have done. We also help develop and prioritize projects to go into the State Transportation Improvement Program, the STIP. That is a 10-year plan, also fiscally constrained. This is where projects are programmed and funded. And this is a source of major transportation projects in the region. And this is, as it says, this is a statewide initiative that RPOs do, the MPOs do. And so then the catch-all is to provide transportation information and services to our local governments. And so this is a balancing act of providing technical expertise in the transportation planning field while being able to respond to the questions and concerns of the members of the public, as well as the needs of our local governments, in a way to make useful plans, but then also to deliver projects that implement those plans. So specifically, the Cape Fear RPO, as I mentioned, we are 3 counties, almost. There are a couple portions, as the map shows, parts of Pender County and Brunswick County that are within the Wilmington MPO, as well as southwestern Brunswick County, which is a part of the GSAT's MPO. So roughly 3 counties, about 26, I believe, municipalities across our planning area. One thing I will note is the RPO, the Cape Fear RPO, is housed within the Cape Fear Council of Governments. And so that gives a multiple layer interest we have in our communities, both as providing transportation services to them through the function of the RPO, but also being able to collaborate with other staff at the COG. And so I will speak for myself in this. That has been a benefit in coming into the region new of having institutional knowledge from one, our executive director, Alan Sirkin, who once upon a time was the RPO director, as well as Wes McLeod, our director of local government services. We're able to collaborate and really we want to look out for our communities. And then here is just the list of the Brunswick County municipalities that are within the RPO planning boundary. The ones in bold, I know that the print's a little small, I apologize for that. Those are communities that have representation on either the RTCC or the RTAC. So just a quick recap of some of the things that we've been up to by way of illustrating what the RPO does. We collect traffic counts, not nearly the robust traffic count program that the Wilmington MPO has. We don't have a staff member for that. I do that also. And recently did counts in BSL. I was going to do counts in Oak Island today, but that's not going to happen because I don't want to set that up in the rain. I'm just going to be honest with you. And then, as I've already mentioned, CTPs. The Cape Fear RPO is unique in that we are finishing up 2 CTPs for 2 of our counties, Brunswick and Columbus, and nearing the start of Pender County CTP. And so that's a lot of planning activity going on, trying to address future growth and the needs for our communities. Prior to coming to the Cape Fear RPO, I was at a different RPO in the state. We did not have several CTPs ongoing, and so I think that is a positive thing in our region that we have a lot of planning activity. There have been 2 East Coast Greenway feasibility studies done in the region recently. The East Coast Greenway, which is, if you're not familiar, is what it sounds like. It is a greenway planned to stretch along the East Coast from Florida to Maine, and it has a route that passes right through our region, both roughly along the 211 corridor through Brunswick County and then up along the 210 corridor in Pender County. A study was recently completed for Pender County, adopted just a few months ago. And then about 2 years ago, a similar feasibility study for the Greenway right through Southport and Oak Island was completed, as well as a whole list of other multimodal transportation plans. The RPO assisted in Southport's pedestrian plan from a few years ago. There was a regional bike plan done, a couple of other nearby pedestrian plans. Another one that was recently brought to my attention that my predecessor, Patrick Flanagan, had worked with Wes on was the Yacht Basin Mobility Study here in Southport. I'm not sure the most up-to-date status of that. That was new information to me, but I just wanted to share that by example of the benefit of being able to balance the COG and the RPO. So I show you this graphic now to illustrate the scope of the transportation planning process. Full disclosure, I stole this graphic from NCDOT, so I can't take credit for illustrating it in this way, but I like it, and so I use it. Showing the full range of, from long-range planning to the construction and the maintenance. Obviously, the far right end of this spectrum, that is the most visible to the public. That's what we're likely to get questions about commonly. I myself do not do the construction, and so I am often apologizing for not having quite that level of knowledge when they come to meetings asking. Again, to show that this front half, the long-range planning, the identifying needs, and trying to connect those needs to funding sources, that is a core purpose of the RPO. And so this is, I understand where a bit of the black box side of planning can come as we try to push projects through in a strategic way that may not always be as transparent as we need to. And so that's an effort that we're taking to communicate that clearly. Which leads to the prioritization process. So some of the thinking behind why this process exists was to provide a transparent way to show how projects are selected for funding and then programmed and working towards construction. When we say prioritization, we're taking projects, we're putting them into a formula, into a quantitative score, and that, in theory, gives us an objective way to obtain funding for the projects that are needed the most. That is also quite idealistic, and so it's sometimes not that cut and dry, but that is the intention, and that's what we work to do. And then the program is when the funding is then assigned to those projects. And as you've heard, that's the 10-year plan, and it's updated every 2 to 3 years. We are, in fact, at the beginning of the next round of updating that. And so that is information that you may have received or been told either through emails from me or from staff that we are working to submit projects currently. And that can be projects such as a sidewalk project. That's how the famous sidewalk project from the ABC store to the hospital, or maybe it's the other way around, depending on your point of view, was funding for ferry projects or for the Cape Fear Jetport, the NC-211 widening that is currently underway. Those are examples of types of projects that go through the prioritization process and then are put into the STIP. And so our current submittal window right now, we are in the middle of that. We have till the end of September. We have an ever-updating list of potential project submittals that our board will approve in September to be submitted for scoring and hopefully potential funding. But anyway, that's what I have for the Cape Fear RPO. Again, I appreciate the opportunity to be here, and I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Any questions?
No, I know the answer to this, but just so everybody has perspective on your funding,
Yes.
It's my understanding that there's $10 million for the NCDOT Division 3 region. Is that how just so we keep in perspective that this is a lot of planning
Correct.
with small dollars?
Correct. That number is the most up-to-date number I have received. I've been told it may change. I don't know in which direction. But yes, the most recent update I received was yeah, for divisional projects, which is specifically where you might submit, you know, a sidewalk project, for example. This time around, the funding is not massive.
And the famous sidewalk project from the ABC store to the hospital scored extra points because it was connecting a central business area
Correct.
to a hospital.
Correct.
And that's how it was able to bubble up. So
Correct.
there are special things that
Correct.
bubble it up score-wise.
Yes, ma'am. Which highlights what I mentioned earlier of, we have the list of projects that we would ideally want if there was no such thing as funding constraints. And then we have this process by which we submit projects, and we have to do so strategically. And that was a project that the RPO identified as working the formula just right to score well. And so that is what we aim to do, as do all RPOs and MPOs. That's just trying to play the game.
So connecting the important point is connecting the hospital to the business district was the crucial, you know, connector. The ABC store was extra credit, and that's what put us over. Thank you, Alderman Carroll.
Having points to connect them. I was talking to Travis about potential sidewalks and maybe connecting the elementary school to where the hospital is. Having your sidewalk get people from places instead of being in seemingly random. It just is how the formula is designed to prioritize projects.
I had the opportunity to attend the May meeting you had along with the city manager at the community college, and we were able to give input about what your maps and your future plans. So that was a really helpful presentation.
I'm glad that you found that meeting useful.
I have a question, and I'm not sure who to address this to. If we have the opportunity to become a member of the three MPTOs, I guess, would they be redundant for us? Would they create conflict, or would it be a case of the parts create a better whole for us? Who do I ask that to?
Sort of a monogamous relationship, it sounds like.
A monogamous relationship.
If I had to guess.
Sure.
We marry all three.
I'll answer the question. So you would only be in one of those. So the way that it is right now, you're in the Cape Fear RPO. It's my understanding that GSATS has expressed an interest in expanding. We've been given a authorization to explore expansion, but ultimately you would have to pick one of those to become a member of. You wouldn't be all three.
And I will add to that, just because my representation is kind of doubled between the RPO and the COG. This is a conversation aside from the Council of Governments, and so I would voice support for Southport doing what is best for Southport, and the COG from that side will still have your best interest in mind. But as Mike said, between the MPOs and the RPOs, you're a member of one or the other.
Just to dumb it down a bit,
Sure.
We heard 10 million out of you. We heard 5 million. No.
Those were separate sources of funding.
No, completely understand. So I guess my question is, who has the most money with the, smallest number of participants so that Southport benefits the greatest?
That is an excellent question that I'm not sure how to answer simply.
Is that the MPO and the RPO are in the same division, which is a 6-county region. And the division funds, the $10 million that was referenced earlier, is spread across the 6-county division. So that 10 million we've got to split that up. And that's based on the competitive prioritization process. As a federally designated organization, the MPO receives federal monies, and we receive additional $5 million in direct attributable funds that we disperse to our members. That's not part of that 10 million.
Any other questions? Okay, excellent.
The
Go
only
ahead.
other thing I would mention is that our development director is our representative on the staff board, and that I noticed in your email, you're looking for any additional projects for consideration in your prioritization process. So I myself am going to send Travis my notes from the May meeting that I turned in, just so for his consideration. So, and anyone that has projects, we did send to our legislative representatives from our pedestrian transportation plan a list of projects. The same one, we want to make sure that Travis has access to that as he makes those judgments.
Yeah, and that was, you said exactly what I was coming up here to say, which is that if it's not in an adopted plan, given the 10 million that is there for the division, but honestly, even if it was 100 million, if it's not in an adopted plan, it's not worth submitting. It's not going to compete. But yes, just to I guess verify that list of projects is currently being updated, and so there's still time if you have things to add. Yep. And then you have in your packet, but if you need to contact me with any further questions, feel free to do so. So, thank you.
Thank you. Excellent presentations. Thank you so much. Next item on the agenda is the presentation of the electricity cost of service study.
This is on. Yes. Good morning. My name is Rick Vandermoss. I'm the manager of rates with Electricities of North Carolina. I would like to thank, a cost of service study is a huge data gathering exercise, and I would like to thank the town manager, the finance director, Mr. Pittenger, and the rest of the city and the electric staff on a very large exercise. Mr. Mark Beauchamp is here today to present the results of that study, and I was just curious, is it okay if I move the screen a little bit so it's easier to see as he presents? Thank you.
Thank you, Rick. Thank you, Board of Aldermen. My name is Mark Beauchamp, and I'm president of Utility Financial Solutions. We've been doing electric, water, wastewater, and gas cost of service studies since 2001, and we teach the cost of service courses for the American Public Power Association, as well as the financial planning courses. We've done well in excess of 2,000 electric cost of service studies, and what I'm here to talk about is the results of this study. Now, I just want to give you, just in summary, what you're going to see. Financially, you're a very financially stable utility. It's a lot to be proud of. The question that's going to be posed to you, the major question, is do we have the potential to decrease rates by 2% if we chose? Or we can keep the rates, not the way they are, which is, I'm going to get to that in a moment, but to have no increase in revenues to the electric utility. Now, some characteristics of your utility is you're about 34% depreciated. What that means is the average utility around the U.S. is about 50%, which means you have newer infrastructure. You've continually reinvested in your system. Now, it doesn't mean you don't have portions of it that don't need to be updated, but in looking at it on an overview, you have a very solid infrastructure, and you're growing. The only thing that we have an issue with, and you'll see this in the cost of service results, is right now you have a demand-side management program, and demand-side management programs are great, and they have value. Unfortunately, the way it's structured, you're giving too much value, and you'll see that in the results. In other words, it benefits you, but not to the degree of the discounts that you're giving. Because what you do is you give a penny per kilowatt hour discount for each of the categories they fall in. So if they go into the category 4, they have a 4-cent per kilowatt hour discount on all their kilowatt hours. Now the category 4, what you're going to see is that is actually your largest use residential class. And so they're getting, a discount on 1,400 kilowatt hours, where the average usage is only a little over 900. But they're getting it on the entire amount. You see, each category of discount has a certain value to it, because you have, say, 2,000 watts of interruptible load, which is the same for every single category, irrespective of the usage level. And so what happens is the higher use customers get more of a discount. That makes sense? Just want to give that overview. You have a lot to be proud about your electric utility. But that is something I want you to think about. Do you want to help correct very slowly over time the overvaluation on the demand side management? Okay. Now, when we do a cost of service study, the very first thing we start with is we do a long-term financial projection. Our models go out 20 years, but really we focus on 5. And that gives us a picture, not just today, but how it's going to look 5 years from now. And of course, when you build a financial projection, it's based on assumptions. I'll go through those assumptions. And this sounds kind of strange, but when you look out 5 years, there's only one thing I'm certain of, and that is I'm going to be wrong, because a financial model has to be dynamic and updated frequently, because the assumptions that you use in building the model may vary from what was originally projected. Now, in determining the financial stability of the utility, we look at 3 key characteristics. One is we identify the minimum level of cash the utility needs to maintain in reserves. In other words, that's to cover certain cash needs. It's called working capital needs. We also look at debt coverage ratio. Another very strong characteristic of your utility, you don't have any debt. Debt to equity ratio is 0, no debt. Very strong. Those, and we have to maintain, if we ever issue debt, we have to maintain a certain bond covenant. And we look at that, but in your situation, it's not relevant. But the minimum cash is. Now, the third target is what we call a target operating income. What that is it establishes an upper boundary. In other words, we don't like to exceed that target operating income, because when we exceed it, we are in fact overcharging our customers. And what you're going to see, and it's because of the growth rate we projected, you're actually going to exceed that number in a few years. All right. Now, the target operating income probably sounds strange because you're non-for-profit. But even though you're non-for-profit, you have to make money to break even. And the reason is because when you put an asset in service, let's say it's an asset that costs $1 million, has a 20-year life, and you charge out depreciation expense, at the end of 20 years, you recovered $1 million. But when you go to replace it, it's going to cost more, because every year the replacement cost of that asset goes up. So that's what we use to establish the target operating income, or in a sense, your break-even point. All right. Once we do that, We then do a cost of service study. Now, what a cost of service study does is it looks at who's driving costs in various portions of your distribution infrastructure and your power supply cost. Take the demand side management program, for example. You know, when you reduce that peak demand, that provides value to the utility and to the community. All right, and so we look at that. We have extremely good, your staff provided us excellent information. I have a high confidence level in the cost of service results because of the data that we received that could allowed us to model customers' usage patterns, okay? In other words, what class is using energy at different times that drives the different cost. That's the cost of service study. We have completed those two parts. Now there's the last part, which is the rate design. And that's why I'm here. Because what I want to discuss is how do we go about fixing some of the inequities in the cost of service? So I'm looking for your guidance. Yeah, I can go and design the rates and do what I think is right, but that's not really what's relevant. It's what you think is right. And that's what I'm looking for is guidance on that, all right? Now, in the financial modeling, we base the model on certain assumptions. Now, you're in a high growth area, so we had to factor in higher growth. And if you look at the growth rates, there it is. We assume 5% annual growth rates for you, which is probably the highest I think I've done in years and years. I mean, you're in a high growth area. The other assumption is inflation. You know, we, as a country, we've been dealing with inflation for the past couple of years, but it is coming down. Right now it's running about 4%. We assume 5% for 2024. And then falling back to what we call more of a historical norm for inflation, which is 3%. 2.5% to 3% is probably the norm. Purchase power costs, those were provided to us by electricities. And you can see that the power supply costs are projected to decrease. You're in a very, not that I want to take too much time, but you are very, very fortunate. When we do work all over the United States, actually internationally, and because of having electricities, you have stable electric prices. And other parts of the country, take the Northeast, you know, they're very susceptible to natural gas fluctuations. We had to increase electric rates for one utility by in excess of 50% because of the unstable and the war in Ukraine driving the price of natural gas, in their case, liquefied natural gas. See, but you have stable prices, which allow you to plan. And from a customer standpoint, there's two things they want. They want reliable service. So when they flip the light switch, the lights come on. And two, they want stable rates, stable prices. Not rates that don't increase, but rates that increase in a manageable fashion. You know, small periodic adjustments. And like I said, because of electricities, which represents 70% of your cost structure, you have stable prices going forward, okay? Then your capital improvement program. And of course, you're in a growth area. So even though your age of your infrastructure is 35%, younger system, you still have in that growth mode. So you have capital investments that are needed to support that growth. So you can see that we have $3.5 million in 2024, and right around between $1.5 and $2 million each year after that. All right. Your depreciation expense runs about $600,000 a year, so it's quite a bit higher than depreciation expense, but it makes sense to me because of the growth of 5% a year. All right. Is there any questions about these assumptions? Now, I'm going to show you 2 slides. This is a summary of the financial modeling results. This is without any rate increases, okay? Now, remember I said that we first want to look at minimum cash, and we identify the minimum level of cash the utility should maintain, which is about $3.5 million. Now, that's not a target, that's a minimum to cover working capital needs. Without any rate adjustments, your cash reserves are between $4 and $5 million. So we're in excess of that minimum level. We're solid. The only issue I have is this is the target operating income. You can see it's about $700,000 in 24 each year. It's increasing because of the capital investments. And it goes up to about $900,000 projected in 2028. When we look at the projected operating income that's going to occur with those growth rates, you can see that we're actually exceeding it pretty much in every year, which would imply that we could decrease rates. My concern about decreasing rates is that we're using a very aggressive growth rate. And if we don't get that growth rate, then we're going to start falling below that number. So I'm more inclined, and of course this is the main question, is do you want to keep the rates stable? Doesn't mean we won't change rates for some customers, but keep overall revenue the same. The other option is to decrease rates by 2%. When we decrease the rates by 2%, our cash balances, of course it decreases our cash, but we're still above the minimum. Our adjusted operating income is pretty much, there's 1 year where we're over, but pretty much falls below the target operating income. And this question is probably one of the main ones I have for the board is, do you want to decrease rates by 2% or keep the level at the 0? Now, I will say this. A 2% rate reduction or a 2% rate increase is not going to be noticed by customers. I'll be very honest. They won't notice it. Doesn't mean you shouldn't do it if you need to, but it's not something, the worst thing that could happen would be to decrease the rates by 2%. Then the growth, instead of being 5%, goes to 2%. Now, all of a sudden, in a few years, we have to come back and I have to stand before you and ask for a rate increase. When that can be, a little bit more challenging. So that's my main question. Do you want to be conservative and have no rate reduction, or to have a slight rate reduction of 2%? Is there any feedback?
I have a couple questions. Looking at the projected track, it says capital improvements plans 3.5 million roughly. That.
Yep.
And so that's for this coming budget year, which included the 1.6 million for underground. And then you go to the next year, which is 1.9. It would seem to me we're trying to accelerate underground as much as is possible. And so I think that maintaining would help us better achieve that, correct?
Yes, absolutely. And the other thing is, I'm sure you're aware that construction costs in the utility industry has just gone up enormously, like 20, 30, 40%, because of the demand that's been placed, the money that's going in basically to replace infrastructure, just so substantial. So even the cost estimates I'm a little bit concerned about, because they could come in a lot higher than what's being projected. So that's the reason why I'm more comfortable with the 0. But.
We had a presentation about water rates a number of years ago, and they said, do not lower your water rates. They were lowered, and then they got behind in terms of replacing pipes and everything, and that's why we had an issue. And their advice was, you don't lower rates. And I think that's probably good advice, and I think that's probably where you're leaning, because we don't know what growth may be, we don't know what construction costs will be and that type thing, and we want to continue burying our power lines and get that to 100% and other issues. So, and like you said, no one's going to notice 2%.
Yeah.
And so I think for the greater good for our city, I think keeping it at that rate, keeping it stable would probably be the way to go.
Okay. All right, good. Thank you. Any
Yeah,
else?
I agree with that. I think maintaining the rate the way it is now. However, I do want to talk a little bit about the demand side management program. So I participate in this on multiple properties, and I just like your input on why we're giving away the farm.
I think the best way to put it is, let's say you have an air conditioning unit. Everybody says air conditioning unit, so it's 2,000 watts. And so when we interrupt it during the peak hours, we get value for that. The problem with the structure of it is everybody's benefit to the utility is the same, but we're putting it on a variable kilowatt hour rate to achieve the benefit. So when you have somebody that uses 1,500 kilowatt hours, they get that discount on all 1,500. But if they use 500 on that, we're getting the same benefit, but we're giving that one with 1,500 kilowatt hours more savings. Does that make sense? In other words, the benefit could be like $3 a month, the true benefit. So what's happening is we're, in a sense, overcharging the 500 kilowatt hour customer. We're undercharging the 1,500. That's the main issue. The dilemma I have is how to fix it.
Do you have some thoughts on how to fix it?
Yeah, I do.
Okay. Do you want to talk about that a little bit?
Sure. Let me first go to the slides. Oops, right here. You have a lot of rate classes, so it took 2 slides to cover all the classes. When you look at like the SR0 or the SPR0, that's no load control. And then the other ones is the different devices under load control. And I want to focus on the residential because it's the biggest one. The residential class is almost right at cost of service. It's really good. 0.1% increase is what the study shows. But then you start getting into load control. We're actually undercharging the first one by 5%. And once you get into the SR4, we're undercharging them by 44%. And what's driving that is 2 things. One, the penny per kilowatt hour for each of the things is, it probably should be about a half cent is our estimate. That's 1. 2, as you go up in these groupings, the kilowatt hour consumption goes up. So you have about 900 kilowatt hours for residential, like 1,000 for the next, 1,100, and it goes all the way up to like 1,400 in the SR4. So because you're giving that benefit on a per kilowatt hour basis, you're giving them not just a doubling in a sense of the benefit, but you're also giving them it on all the kilowatt hours. So if you compare it to an average residential customer, the SR4 is getting an additional 1.5 times benefit. You follow me on that? That's why you're seeing these inequities. And the thing about rates is, I'm an accountant and a CPA, so I tend to be conservative, okay? The worst thing you can do is to move rates drastically and create rate shock on customers. When the ideal situation is to develop where you want to go, then develop a track, in a sense, to move slowly toward that goal over time, because so that you don't dramatically adjust or change somebody's bill. I mean, I would never go to the board and recommend a 44% rate increase on a specific number of customers. What I would do is say, would you be comfortable if we targeted on some of these as high as a 3% increase? In other words, give the SR4 a 3% increase. Yeah, it's going to take a lot of years. And maybe you want me to be more aggressive, and that's the other main question I have, is how aggressive do you want me to be? Now, with that additional revenue, it's not going to be a lot, but it will be additional revenue. What you see in the next slide is when you get into the commercial, again, the commercial without load control, you're actually seeing that we're overcharging in a sense. And so what I'd like to do is to take the revenue from changing the load control program and increasing that revenue and basically giving somewhat of a rate reduction to the commercials. And again, move slowly. The big question I have is a 3% increase enough? Should that be extended to 5% as a target? And that's probably my main question to the board. I think that just in the general feeling is that just in the comments that yes, we need to fix that. We need to start on a path to correct it. But then what I'm looking for when we go to design the rates, what are you comfortable with as far as that upper boundary increase? And then we can design the rates to meet that.
Ellie,
go ahead.
Ellie, would you mind talking just a bit about our load management program and what each of those tiers would require of someone to get all the way down to tier 4? Do you mind? I know I'm putting you on the spot.
Honorable Mayor, distinguished board guests, I'm Ellie Pittenger, electrical superintendent. The R4 rate, they basically get a double discount. They get 2 cents off for going on the total air conditioning. The SR3 folks have load management on their water heater. They've got it on their air conditioning that cycles, and they've got it on their heat strips during the winter. For SR4, we take the air conditioning and we don't let it cycle. We turn it off for the entire duration. And for that discomfort, we give them another penny per kilowatt hour discount. That's basically the difference between SR4 and the other rates.
Yeah, my point in saying that is that for the consumer to give up so much, I think giving them back a greater discount makes sense. So I think that when it was created, it was justifiable to give the person who was on SR4 a significantly greater discount than SR1 or SR2 or SR3. So I'm kind of in favor of us keeping that because, you know, people turning off their air conditioners, I think that you're giving up something and you're getting a greater discount because of it.
And also, it's not the most popular rate. We've got currently, we meander between 52 and 48 customers on it, and it's been that way for a long time. We don't go much higher than that.
I have a question about as you were doing your calculations, because I know from our monthly bill for peak hour, which is this is all about peak hour, we spend more for that 1 hour of electricity than we do for the whole month.
Correct.
For the rest of everyone's electricity. It's
correct.
crazy.
Oh, yeah, it is.
You have to see it to believe it on the paper. But my question then is, so does this take in, I know it says cost of service, does this take in the savings? Is that what you're measuring here? the savings from those individual accounts that are capitalizing on this.
Yeah, as I mentioned earlier, we got really, really good load research data. So we know how much each class is contributing to those peak demands. And because of the load research, we had high confidence in it. And so what you're seeing is we're giving them, or charging them is a better way to put it, the allocated demand that they're actually incurring on the system. Because you gotta remember, only a portion of the load is being controlled. It's not their entire load. The other thing to think about is, especially with the SR4, people have to really inconvenience themselves to shut off air conditioning for an hour or 2 hours. And when we send that strong a price signal, we're telling them to inconvenience themselves for value that isn't worth what we're paying them. In other words, wouldn't it be better to send the proper price signal, let them make the decision in an appropriate fashion as to whether or not they want to be inconvenienced to that degree, and, or not, because the rest of the ratepayers are really giving them more than they should. And so there's two ways to look at everything. One is, yes, they're inconveniencing themselves, so they should benefit from that. The question becomes, should they benefit more? And we're giving them over incentive to be inconvenienced. And I just don't think that is something that would be, if we send them the right price signal, then some may fall off that program, but that's okay. That's okay. It's okay because, actually financially, the system will improve. So, but again, I don't want to do anything quickly. I would want to do it very slowly. So that, one, a lot of times customers make investments to be able to do this, and it's really unfair in a sense to pull the rug out from under them and totally change the economics of their investments. And so that's the other reason why I want to make sure that they get any investments that they made back. So,
Mr. Bojam, and maybe Ellie too, I don't know, y'all both maybe want to weigh in on this, but so if we were to lower the incentives offered through the program, and assuming fewer people then took advantage of the program, at some point, does it become not even worth doing? I mean, relative to what you're saving on the peak hour? I mean, I guess I'm struggling to figure out if we're giving away too much now, and my recollection, Ellie, from talking to you in the past is, frankly, we're struggling to get people to sign up for load management. If we make load management less attractive, if you will, and at what point does it become not even worth doing, I guess is my question.
Well, demand-side management is becoming more and more of an important program around the United States. Capacity issues, with the plant shutting down all over, capacity is a major issue. And moving to renewables, which is good, the problem is it's intermittent, and we still have to have capacity to back it up, dispatchable generation, but they're shutting down. And so one of the things that utilities are moving toward is demand-side management programs, like what you have. The demand-side management program is good if customers want it. There's value there. There's value to the utility. And, it's a program I would definitely keep. I just think it needs to be modified. All right.
Thank you. I think I would agree that any changes should be made gradually. Mm-hmm. And incrementally, I guess.
Mark, I have a quick question. Since I've been here in November, I've heard the electric rates, I don't live here, I live down on the other end of the county, are extremely expensive. Do you find our rates very high in comparison with others?
No, I don't actually. I mean, every region of the country has the different things that drive electric rates higher. I mentioned the Northeast. You know, because they're so dependent on natural gas and renewables, that's why the rates are so high. Out in California, it's similar things happening. California's rates are enormous, but the whole East Coast, not so much here, but further north is really expensive. But every region has different costs with respect to electricity. And from a national perspective, I think your rates are reasonable, even from a local perspective. Now, one of the things that I have noticed, and it's not here, but it's just a general statement, is that whenever you get into a growth situation, in other words, you're in a high growth area, as you can see, your capital improvement program goes up. So what frequently occurs is you start getting into a cash burn situation because your capital improvements are so high. And high growth utilities tend to suffer from cash flows, and we have to issue a lot of debt. But because historically you've done the right things with electric rates, we don't have to do that. I mean, we can make these improvements without having rate increases. And you know, others are going to have rate increases because capital improvements are, you know, everybody's making them right now. And your system's 35% depreciated. You're in a really good position to have stable rates for an extended period of time. You know, I don't know what's going to happen in the future, you know, maybe nuclear plant could be shut down or whatever, which is going to affect the cost. But, you know, you are going to be more stable. But I didn't think your rates were that high, no.
Yeah, and Bonnie, I think a lot of that comes from, in years past, I think our rates were very high, but in the last, I don't know, 5, 6, 7 years, there's been various things that have occurred that have actually allowed us, well, I think we had a major rate lowering a few years ago when some of the debt off the nuclear plant was redone by Duke. So I just think a lot of people still sort of have the historical opinion that our electric rates are really high, and reality's kind of moved on from that.
It is. I do want to say that this area did have higher rates than the rest of the country on average because of the nuclear investments that were made. But that has stabilized, and you're actually probably on average or even below now. So. I do have one other slide. Right now, you're charging for residential $23 a month, fixed monthly charge. That's that customer charge or facilities charge. In many ways, it's probably the most least understood charge that utilities have, because customers tend to view it, well, Dunkin' Donuts doesn't charge me to walk through the door. Why does electric utilities have to charge me a fixed charge? Well, the difference is Dunkin' Donuts, in a sense, makes an investment on behalf of the community. But utilities, be it electric, water, wastewater, gas, they make an investment specifically for your home. Because when you have a house, we have to have a meter on that house. We have the responsibility to repair the meter, to replace the meter, to read the meter every month, to send the customer the bill, and to maintain the service drop into their home or facility. Without a doubt, those are fixed costs that do not vary based on consumption. There is a controversial piece of it. That is that the home, we can't deliver electricity without a wire going from the substation to the home. So then the question becomes, how much of that wire should be allocated between the customer charge and the usage charge? And we do go through an analysis called a minimum system analysis that says, what is the minimum sizing requirements? And that portion of that is allocated into the fixed monthly customer charge. So I wanted to just explain what that charge is. Now, the cost of service study says the residential you're charging 23 should be 19. I probably wouldn't change the 23. I'd probably freeze it, you know. And so in other words, we're not going to increase it. We're just going to keep it the same. So, and that's the other piece. I just want your opinion. If you're, that's my last slide. It sounds like you're okay with no overall increase in revenues. You're good with phasing and adjustments, primarily to the demand side management. The only thing is, would you allow me 3%, 4%, or 5% increase for them as far as an overall target? That's the main question I have. And that'd be an annual adjustment.
Are you talking about the growth rate or
No,
rate?
I'm talking
Load
about
management. The
demand
load-
side management.
Demand side, what's the target? 3, 4, 5%? Not that he's going up right away, but the gradual increase. What would your target rate? Alderman Carroll says 3%, roughly. What
three.
does the board think on that?
And that, I'm not sure about how to calculate the math, but I'm going to use 5 only because that's round. So then it said 44%. So would that be essentially 9 years? I don't know
It would
how to
take us that long, yeah.
About 9 years before it met that.
Correct,
So,
unless electric cities change their cost structure that could bring the value back to some degree or lower it.
okay. Versus 3% would be
It'd be a
15
long, long
years,
time.
15
Yeah.
years, something like
Yeah.
that. Okay.
Well, how about somebody be King Solomon and suggest 4%?
Cut the baby in half, yeah, thank you. Wisdom of Solomon.
I mean, I think
4%?
What's your recommendation, or do you have one?
I actually like the 4%, I'll be honest with you.
All right, well, let's
Okay.
go with that. We'll
You notice I didn't say that because I had a feeling that's what was going to happen.
okay, did that answer
Yeah.
that question for you? I'm asking now, this monthly customer charge, if I'm looking, COS means cost of service,
yeah.
right? So we're really supplementing commercial based on these numbers? If you go back to the monthly customer charge slide. Yeah, the facility charge.
Yeah, that one probably should go up. And
Yeah.
so I'll probably raise that. In other words, in the process, because the commercial as a class, we're over recovering. So what we will probably do is increase the customer charge and lower the energy charge, and in total give them a reduction. Even though we're increasing the customer charge, we would give them an overall reduction, depending on the revenue we get when we make that 4% adjustment.
Okay.
Okay.
Just a real quick question, because somebody, live feed was wondering, is there, I guess somebody misunderstood and thought you meant that like a nuclear plant was going to shut down or something? And if we could just clarify that the plants are not.
Oh, no, there's no plan to shut down your nuclear plant, but a lot of nuclear plants have shut down. Now, they're reopening them too, because around the United States, one 20 minutes south of me, Palisades, they shut it down last year and they're reopening it next year. It's difficult to explain the reason why, but in a nutshell, Federal Energy Regulatory Commission prefers natural gas units because they're quick starting and they pair well with renewables that are intermittent. And so the financial incentives, when they develop the markets, they make it difficult for what's called a base load plant, like a nuclear or coal unit, to be able to generate enough money to pay all their bills, basically. They give additional incentive to natural gas units. But that's the reason why nuclear had been shutting down, because the economics weren't there because of the way the markets are structured. But they're trying to change that. So.
When you, we're familiar, I don't know if how much you're familiar with North Carolina and the School of Government Finance dashboard that we are able to calculate our water sewer rates on, so we can project them out. Well, we have a table like that so that the reason is if we're changing these rates incrementally year after year after year, so that it's followed through on.
Yeah. Normally we recommend 3 years worth of rates, and we bring to you 3 years of rate designs for approval. So I don't have to come back here next year to do it again. We can do 5 years, but I'm always hesitant to do 5 years. And the reason is utilities tend to think they're set for 5 years. And the reality of it is, as I started off, when I do a 5-year projection, the only thing I'm certain of is I'm going to be wrong. And so I want the ability to come back in 3 years to see how we're doing. So that's why I prefer to do a 3-year rate design. And that's, our models are set up, that's not an issue. Actually, I think, to be honest with you, Mike Johnson, who is the manager, actually did the rate designs. So we just have to change that 4%. So. I got everything that I need. Is there any other questions?
Any other questions, board? Okay. All right, thank you. Excellent presentation, excellent discussion.
Thank you.
So now the headline in the pilot will be tomorrow, nuclear power plant closing. Thank you. Please, Bob, don't do that. All right. Our next item is a little more concrete. It's a discussion about political signs in the city. I called someone yesterday just randomly to ask them about signs in the right-of-way and that type thing, and they mentioned that they didn't want a sign in the right-of-way that was in front of their house, because what if they didn't support that candidate? So I look forward to this discussion on the political signs, right-of-way, and that type thing.
Yeah, I brought this up only because I was trying to plan ahead, and so I read through the ordinance, and I saw that in Southport, you cannot put political signs in the city right-of-way, and whereas for the State Board of Elections says that you can put them in the state highways and roads right-of-way, and of course there are restrictions on size and how far from the pavement and so on. But I honestly don't remember where I put signs last time, and so do we want to keep it that way? Do we want to keep the signs off of city streets? I mean, we certainly have plenty of state roads in Southport that we can use. Just want to be sure that we know what we're doing.
Yeah, I think as written has worked well in the past, and I don't think people want a sign, that makes it look like they're supporting a candidate when they're not. What I would do, and what I'm sure the other candidates do, they ask someone if they would like a sign to put in their yard, and they put it there. And on the state roads, you can put them in the right of way. And in discussion with the city manager, she said if I put one in the city right away, that she would have someone pick it up. So I agree. I agree wholeheartedly.
Yeah, that's my experience. We have always, the public works crew, I've said, and unfortunately they spend a lot of time, and then we get arguments. How come this one's in the right of way? So I say, pick them all up, just pick them up.
Yeah, I would wholeheartedly be in favor of keeping the ordinance the way it is. I know 2 years ago that it was enforced pretty much as our city manager's talking about. We now have early voting, and so these signs come out a whole lot longer than what they used to. And so I definitely support maintaining the ordinance.
I also brought this up so that I figured this is how we would go, but so that homeowners will know if a sign has appeared in front of their house in the right-of-way and it's a city road, they should call if this is not somebody they support. Call the city hall, ask for the city manager.
They should call either way, because the ordinance says not in the right of way, whether you support the person or not.
If the sign is in an inappropriate place, then it'll be removed. Simple as that. All right, well, thank you. Good, quick discussion there. And then our last item is the review of the agenda for the August 10th, 2023 Board of Aldermen meeting.
Mayor, I've got one thing. If everyone will look at, it should have at your station, we are asking to add to the agenda some minor changes, a couple little minor changes to the cemetery committee ordinance. Should I go through them now or just? No, I'll just do them at the table, but you can read these. It's very simple, and so I'd like to add that to the agenda.
Can we add it to the consent? Because you're right, it is pretty simple.
I'm okay with it going to the consent agenda if everyone's okay with that, absolutely.
Do y'all have any questions about this?
Okay, good. So, would you like to go down the list, city manager, of our agenda, and we'll.
I think the consent agenda is pretty crystal clear on the minutes, and then this budget amendment for the reimbursement was something that took place, that should have taken place, I should say. It happened before I was here, so we just need to add monies into the this year's budget because we did not realize we needed to put this in there, so that's what that's about. Public hearings on text amendment, signage, and illumination, and also a rezoning on the map amendment. We have to have that. And an update on Up Your Arts, which I think a lot of you have been looking for. On the agenda, we have Tom and Tom with us, but W.K. Dixon, Carter's going to come in and give an update on all our projects, but also at the same time allow for them to continue into our next phase, which is an I&I study. We received a $400,000 ARPA grant to get that, and that's going to have to do with doing smoke testing in some of the homes. So we have talked about a definite PR campaign on this, a big one, because so people will understand what's happening, and we'll do door knockers and all kinds of things to make sure that those homes that are affected understand what's going on. And you know, it's okay that you're going to see smoke, and don't panic and all that. So we got to do a big campaign on that one. But Tom and Tom are here if you have questions on those. Conditional zoning text amendment, I don't think I have to explain that one at all, but it's time for you guys to make a decision on which way you want to go with that. We're going to take homeless off and move it over to a workshop, which we'll try to get dates from all of you later on. And then you have to fix a public hearing for a text amendment for short-term vacation rental ordinances. I don't know if you have questions on that for Travis while he's here. Finance policy, again, Paul's bringing forth, and I have highly encouraged this one. You have had no internal control policy, and you have got to have internal controls to make sure that, you know, everybody is watching everybody else so that we don't have monies, and you've never had a policy. So hallelujah, you're going to have one. And in fact, the auditor, the new auditor, has been saying, where's your internal control policy? So it's going to be great to be able to finally give it over to them. So,
I think Alderman Carroll was in charge of that initially, right? He was watching all our monies, but now we have a policy, so that's good. Thank you.
the ABC appointment, I think it's just naming someone for that. Stabilization of West Bay Street, Councilman, God, I still have that in my head from before. Board member Carroll brought this to my attention, that there was a major erosion problem going on Bay Street. After a lot of research and meetings with Heather and Tom, and even Robert was involved, they've come to a way that they're going to be able to stabilize that whole area before we lose the sidewalk and we lose the road. It's not going to be cheap to do this. I think we're looking at 180 something, 3,000 in order to do this, but it's because of the rock. These guys actually went and did a tour of a quarry, the only quarry, right, in North Carolina, to figure out what size they're going to need in order to do this project. Heather and Tom's have been in touch with Tara, right, is that her name, at CAMA? She knows the emergency nature of us to get this done ASAP, so she's going to work with us to expedite this once we have the money in place. So that money is going to be coming from the capital fund, in which we have plenty that we can utilize to get this fixed ASAP. And then, hallelujah, we got 3 bids for cemetery maintenance, and one of them, what's the name of them, Tom? Yeah, I found that a very interesting name.
I think it's actually Best Funeral Service Maintenance or something.
Yeah, it's kind of funny. So,
Stop, I don't believe that. No.
They're our recommendation for taking over the maintenance, and that will give up and free up a lot of Tom's staff to help Heather with parks that she's been looking to do, and some other projects, so I think it's a win-win for all of us. And then I think that's pretty much it for the agenda, and a lot of the staff is here if you have questions.
So that's actually, I have the agenda on my phone right here. It's modern technology, and the ABC is a reappointment. We did interviews, and so that's all set. The let's see, we do have what, we have closed sessions at our next meeting. We will have 2 closed sessions, so beware of that. And any questions about the agenda board? And we can. They'll send out an email, and we'll get a date as soon as possible for a time for our town hall on workshop on homelessness. Okay, very good. We'll go with board comments. Alderman Allen, Alderman Carroll.
None, thank you.
Yeah, I would like to just say thank you to staff. The Toms, Heather, Bonnie were all over the East Bay issue and
West Bay.
West Bay, thank you. Yep, I know where I am. So
I'm just teasing you.
So it was awesome just to see that whole process unfold and how great our staff is. We're very, very fortunate.
Alderman Lombardi. Okay. Mayor Pro Tem. And I'm saving you for last. Best for last. Our Reverend Alderman Lowe Davis.
No comment.
All right. Well, thank you. This has been an excellent meeting. I want to thank our city staff. This was a very large workshop, a lot of information, which was good, and very grateful for that time. So I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
Second.
Okay, all in favor? Motion carried. Thank you. Meeting adjourned.